Sorry for the interruption, folks. I'd like to call the work session on June 1st, 2022 at 6 p.m. to order. The first agenda item is a bid recommendation, flood warning systems, from the Office of Emergency Management. Chrissy Cornwell, you have the floor.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. President, Mayor, and City Council members. This evening, I invited Mr. Mark Boone from Roston Solutions and Mr. David Key from ESP Associates to update the council on the flood warning system project. This project was started back in 2017 with Roston and my predecessor, Mr. Steve Allen, to ensure that the city government was able to monitor and notify residents and businesses of any potential flooding issues. I'm honored to be a part of this project and excited to move forward on the next phase as we continue on this journey. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it over to Mark and David to give a short update, and then I will, after they're done, then I will present the bid recommendation to the council. Mark and David, you want to go ahead and take over and share your screen?
Sure. This is Mark Boone, and while I'm speaking, I think David's going to start sharing his screen. But really quickly, it's been a joy to work with the city and with the mayor's office and with Chrissy in particular. We started working with Chrissy's predecessor, Steve, who is his spirit is lingering over this this project because he had an interest a long time ago in getting a way to notify residents of a pending flood. And it just so happened that when he and I met, I explained that I had worked on a similar type system in the city of Charlotte, one of the very first in the nation. And there are not a lot of these out there, and Laurel is way ahead of the curve as far as getting this type of system to warn residents ahead of any flooding situation. So the city is to be commended for its commitment to endeavor on this project. We were able to get grant funding for a large portion of the project, which the city has received from the Maryland Department of the Environment. And that's really exciting that the funding was provided for the majority of this. As COVID hit, it obviously affected our ability to conduct a lot of the work in the progress. However, we have concluded phase one, and phase two is a much faster phase, and that's what we were hoping to talk to you about. However, we understand that we have new council members and new staff, and so we're available to explain more about this system. So I'm going to turn it over to David and let him give you a quick overview and let you know where we are and where we're headed. And then we will both be available for comments. So David, if you can take it from here.
Yes. How's my audio, Mark? Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you fine.
Okay, good evening or late afternoon, everyone. My name again is David Key. I've been working on this project for about 18 months as we've gone through the initial requirements and what we call phase one and phase two. And to at the executive summary level, there's two phases to this project. Phase one was more of a data gathering and a requirements analysis to make sure we knew exactly what was available and what Laurel needed and wanted. And then phase two is moving into the actual installation of the sensors and the development of the database and application to provide that real-time flood warning mapping. So Mark had asked me to go through some examples, and I've got a few slides of the state of the art that's out there right now in the nation with respect to real-time mapping. And that's what the system that Laurel is proposing is doing real-time mapping. So a lot of sites are out there showing how fast and how far rivers are rising and falling. But to marry that up with an actual map of where the floodplain is and what's being impacted by that flooding is what this system's all about. So I've got 4 or 5 examples of what's out there now in the country. South of Maryland, down in North Carolina, is a system called FIMAN. That's an acronym that stands for Flood Inundation Mapping and Alert Network. This is a very mature system. It's a public system. It's been around since 2004, but had several refreshes and updates and taken to a more modern platform. This system provides real-time mapping for over 500 sites, large rivers, small flashy tributaries, coastal areas, storm surge, etc. It offers email and text alerts for a user base that has about 10,000 users that are from private citizens, and weather stations and other emergency management staff use the alerts, and those come at predefined levels via email and text. The system has emergency operations system reports that are generated from the system that give roll-ups and summaries at the regional level or during events. The FIMAN system offers not only just a view of where the floodplain is and is going, but what buildings and what critical infrastructures are going to be impacted by the current and forecasted flood levels. The system uses more robust nationwide USGS sensors, but it also uses some newer technology that we're proposing for Laurel, which is a lower cost sensor, which is based on a much more modern platform and are offered at about a third of the cost of the standard sensors. This is an example of what that system looks like. The blue area is the real-time flood inundation. So this is updated every 15 minutes during a storm. It shows the current flood inundation and the current buildings that could be impacted, as well as the forecasted inundation and the forecasted building. And that's based on time and the projected peak of the storm. Example number 2 is another system that was built off of that FIMAN, but this was built for transportation infrastructure. These are roads and bridges. These are not showing impacts to buildings. It's showing roads that are underwater, both in a current and forecasted flood stage. So the roads that you see there in the middle of the screen are color coded based on how deep the water is over that road, where you've got yellow is around a half a foot, all the way up to reds and purples, which are 2 to 4 to 5 feet of flooding over the road. Very valuable asset when you've got, some of your roads that are going underwater that could cause some cars to be swept off the road. Example number 3, recently deployed system in Roanoke, Virginia, along 10 miles of the Roanoke River. This is providing real-time updates every 15 minutes as well, both a real-time and forecasted floodplain map, and also forecasted impacts to buildings. So you can see those color-coded buildings there show the depth of water forecasted to be in the building. That goes from yellow to brighter yellow to orange to red to purple. Example number 4 is what Mark mentioned. This is down in Charlotte, North Carolina. This is a system that covers the entire county. It's about 200 sensors and about 300 miles of rivers and streams and tributaries. Again, this is updated. This is a system that uses the low-cost sensors or the more modern sensors, all-in-one sensors, and this provides real-time, and also it provides post-storm event inundation mapping for deploying damage assessment crews. This is an example of some of the alerting that are in some of the systems. You can see users can log into the system and they can choose their alerts. And there are, in this example on the left, there are 4 standard alerts that would go from a monitor, minor, moderate, and major, which would go from that yellow up to purple. Those are the default settings, but the users could also specify an exact level, or a city official, somebody with emergency management. The system can allow you to get alerts when it is rising, when it is falling, or when it is forecasted, or any combination of those two. So some users may only be interested in the forecast. Some users may not be interested in if it's going to fall below that. So the middle part of the screen shows some of what's possible to allow users to have a lot of flexibility, and they could choose whether they want to be alerted via email or via text message. This is some examples of the system in Roanoke we were able to validate the accuracy of that system. What you're seeing on the screen, the map in the background, is a screenshot of the application in May of 2020. And the blue area is obviously the real-time inundation mapping. And the inset video screenshot was from drone photography during that May flood. So you can see the arrows are pointing to arrows on the drone imagery and the same area on the ground. So if you could just look at that muddy water compared to the blue inundation, this is what we like to see with reliable data with these sensors and with some of the GIS mapping. So this is some of the accuracy that you can expect to see from a system like Laurel's with the data that you've got. So you can see these sidewalks here and these turns in here. So we had very good correlation of what was happening on the ground in the system with what was actually happening in real life. So these are some calibration shots that we took on the system for Roanoke. So what have we done? What have we accomplished on phase one, which was the requirements analysis? In January of this year, we made our final deliverable for what we called phase one, and that was a requirements analysis. That was a culmination of a series of meetings with Laurel staff, emergency management staff, and other stakeholders to dive into what was available. And the bullets on the left there is a summary of what was in that initial phase one product. It was a technical review of all of the data in Laurel. That would be the mapping data or the GIS data, the flood modeling data that was available. It was a great study by the Corps that is driving some of the modeling that would produce this system. And there's some existing gauges and sensors, a review of that. So that was the first step. The second review was to look at the systems in Laurel and make some installation recommendations of where additional sensors would be needed to help drive the application. And then we went into a series of meetings to talk about what Laurel needed, what type of alerting would be needed, what would the mapping interface look like, what types of impacts would the application want to show, roads, buildings, etc. We discussed some IT requirements, some initial and long-term hosting requirements for the database, and then the final deliverable was the implementation plan and cost estimate for what it would take to purchase the sensors, install the sensors, and do all the work to build a pilot system, to build and host a pilot system. This is a map of the gauge location recommendations. It's part of the requirements report. You can see 7 locations there. For the requirements report, we identified base services in that phase 2 recommendation along the Patuxent, which would be covered with 3 sensors, sensor 1, 2, and 3, I-95, US 1, and 198. That would cover the entire reach of the river through the city and then some. And then we have optional services on Bear Branch and Crow Branch. The sites 4, 5, 6, and 7 would be an optional location, which would require additional sensors and also some modeling to develop the inundation, the real-time inundation. This is just a map of some of the screenshots, some screenshots of some of the figures that were in the phase 1 deliverable. This just shows a schematic of what these sensors look like. In the upper right, you can see one of the low-cost sensors by a company called Intellisense. It's an all-in-one flood sensor. It has a data logger. It has the pressure transducer. It has a battery. It has the telemetry, which is both a combination of cellular and also iridium satellite if the cellular were to go down, and also solar panels to charge the battery. Those little squares around all 4 corners and the top are solar panels that charge the battery. So they're self-sufficient and have great battery life even after 4 or 5 days of cloudy weather. The battery will hold. Schematic shows how these are installed. They're installed within a right-of-way, usually on a 3-inch pipe above a flood level. And then there's a buried conduit that goes from the sensor down to the water level and it pushes out through a piece of PVC, completely hidden and buried and low maintenance. That would be the pressure transducer. And with that, Mark and Chrissy, I can entertain questions or dig into some of the reports or anything the council, any questions council may have, I'm happy to answer.
Any questions from the council?
Yeah, Mr. President, I have a couple of questions.
Go ahead, Councilman Sidnor.
First question, I want to know the acronym GSI. What does that stand for?
GIS is an acronym, Geographic Information Systems. Essentially, it's a combination of map data with GIS, with a database. So a great example would be, it's basically the engine that drives a software product like Google Maps is based on the GIS technology.
All right, thank you. Two more other questions, I'll be finished. Can you go back to the, you said the seven gauges that recommended, and you said 3 of them are base services and the other 4 are optional?
Yes, sir.
You mean by optional? I know what optional mean though, but so are you recommending that we get all 7 gauges, or are you recommending time we just get the 3 base gauges?
That would be based on the funding that's available. These gauges.
Actually, David, if you want to, you can let Chrissy answer that.
Oh, I apologize.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
no worries. She just popped up.
That's okay. Councilman, I just want to let you know that the recommendation includes the optional ones. I thought it was in the city's best interest to include them all, just to make sure we're covering the city for all of our potential flooding issues.
Okay, thank you. And my final question is, how often are these gauges sensors going to be on maintenance?
You want me to answer that, Mark?
Yeah, so the maintenance of the system itself, we have David, his company, as well as KCI, the engineer of the city. We have a 1-year arrangement, and then ongoing beyond that, it's going to depend on the manufacturer chosen as well as the gauge. But the ones that we are looking at, they have a pretty good lifespan for them. I think, David, you probably, I think I've seen more than 5 years on some of these. Is that right?
Yes.
And
the city of Charlotte has been using these. In the recommended vendor is IntelliSense. City of Charlotte installed 3 different brands of low-cost sensors and compared them for over a year. They ended up going with IntelliSense for 115 locations in Charlotte, and those are still operating 2 years later. They have had a little bit of maintenance issues on 5% of those. Usually that is a pressure transducer that may get a little debris on top of it. So there is a maintenance schedule. Most of the maintenance deals with the pressure transducer and the probability of a little debris accumulating around that. The need for maintenance can be determined from a dashboard that shows you those readings in real time.
So we're looking at, as far as maintenance is concerned, though, one of the options we have is to educate and train the city on how to provide simple maintenance on their own. But just like the city has a contract with the USGS for the gauge that's on the dam, there's one that's provided by USGS. We can do something similar. The goal is that these are very low maintenance, very high function, and very affordable for the consumer that's purchasing them, specifically municipalities. But we do have them, David. Some of these areas, just so that I kind of wanted to mention some of the areas that were chosen. Obviously, the riverine areas are very vulnerable, and you do have homes in the floodplain there, as well as other nearby assets. But the Bear and the Crow branch also has, I believe there's a police department, there's some other critical infrastructure, and there's a parking. I think, Chrissy, correct me if I'm wrong. There's a parking lot there where the but for the rail commuters, that this would also help to monitor and help to notify if there's an emergency.
That's correct, Mark.
One final question, I guess it's probably almost a silly question to ask though, but I'm thinking of, these gauges, would they require a diver to install these gauges? So how would they be installed?
No, they the installation is relatively easy. No diver involved. Just maintenance personnel, and we would need, for most installations, we need to make sure we stay within the right of way and coordinate with that. But no OSHA requirements, no diver, no getting into the river at all, just along the edge of the river. At normal water elevation or 6 inches below normal water elevation. Anything below that would not be needed for the sensor.
Thank you. Include my question. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. President.
Councilman Sidnor. Any other questions or comments from the council?
Just have a couple.
Sure. Go ahead, Councilman DeWalt.
What price are we talking about each one of these sensors?
David, I think that's in the report.
Yes. You may to pull that up. I can get to
Yeah, Councilman, if you can just bear with us for 1 minute, we'll pull it off the report, okay? Because we want to give you the accurate number.
Just an estimate.
At the date of this proposal, it was around $3,600 each for the hardware for each sensor, and then the installation around $4,000 worth of labor, but for the installation. That would be for the base services of 3. So you could count on around $4,500 each for parts and installation labor. And
you proposed we're going to have 7 of them. I mean, if we went down to these locations, would anybody be able to look and see them there?
You would not be able to see it at the creek level, but you would be able to see it at the street level.
Okay, so the people would. What's the effects on any sort of vandalism or anything like that to them?
That's a fantastic question. Look at this here. This is a mounting bracket for this sensor. So this sensor mounts on this bracket and it is locked on this bracket. There could be vandalism, but it's much better than the old school sensors where things were in pieces and parts. You could essentially have vandalism to that cell antenna. You could, but as somebody ripping it off, they would have to rip it through this metal stainless steel mounting bracket that's on the pole. But there's always a chance for theft and vandalism.
Is there any, have you guys thought about putting any sort of alarm or anything on that would either be audible or go back to a dispatcher or something like that if someone was to, or say something came down the river or something and hit it real hard, that or what's the recommended that these have to be checked? How often?
That's a good idea on the alarm. That functionality may or may not exist with IntelliSense out of the box, but with respect to debris, these would be sighted such that they are above a flood of record elevation as much as possible. At each location, we would look at the flood of record. So we definitely do not want these getting inundated. Obviously, the pressure transducer will get inundated all the time. The installation of 115 of these in Charlotte, and they're in Louisville and lots of other places as well. There hasn't been a lot of theft if they're mounted in an inconspicuous location. They're about the size of a large football or rugby ball. That shape, and sometimes that's mounted on a pole. It could be mounted on a telephone pole. It could be mounted on part of the bridge structure, away from the line of sight of typical pedestrian.
I thought it was going to be a lot bigger from what looking at it.
Yeah. So David, one thing that you may want to advise council, as far as what happens if one of these gets disconnected from the network.
Well, imagine a dashboard where all 7 of these sensors will be showing readings every 15 minutes. You go to that dashboard and you will immediately be notified that you're not getting a reading. You could be set up to get text message. The admin could be set up to get text message when those readings stop. In addition, the site would show the battery voltage, so you can see how your charge is going. You can see, the time if you've got a telemetry problem. So there's a maintenance dashboard where a system operator could look at all 7 of them at one time, look at the voltage drop over time to see if you're having a battery problem, or see if you've had a gap in the reading or a gap in telemetry. So folks in Charlotte have a routine where they come in every day and just look at their system, and they can see if anything's failed overnight or been stolen or what have you.
So Councilman, if I may, because I think you also get to the heart of another matter, and that is public information. Because grant funding was provided for this, we will be doing some minor public information that's going to happen on monitors and different bulletins within the city that will advise the city advise residents that the city has received this funding for this purpose. And so we'll use the opportunity to notify residents that we have a flood warning system being installed. We could conceivably advise the city to label the posts if needed, or label the any protective hardware if we wanted to. But my advice has always been less said is best said, and kind of out of sight, out of mind for these types of sensors, because we don't necessarily want to draw attention to the sensor as much as we want to draw attention to the location. So, for example, when I was in Charlotte, we had inundation events, flooding events, and the media was aware of the flood warning system, and so they would be able to see where flooding was taking place, and so they would go to that location. That's where they would shoot, and they would see that the fire department was already dispatched to that location. So that's one potential benefit for the city, is to improve public information. But again, I do think that again, we're going to do some light publication of the installation in accordance to the grant, but I don't know that I would recommend putting much more information out there as far as the location.
Well, but that's part of my last question is our constituents. So are they going to have access to, is it going to be some sort of a city app or something like that? How they would be able to get these alerts? Once an alert comes out as far as the flooding goes, will they have to go to that? Is it automatically going to be coming out to everybody?
Chrissy, do you want me to answer that?
Yeah.
The site will be, unless you choose differently, the site would be available to the public. Users would be able to sign up for alerts at various levels. They could choose the default levels of, does it get into a warning stage or a higher stage, or they could choose custom alerts, and they could log in and store their username and their cell phone number to get alerts via text message. They could go back into the system and turn those alerts off if they no longer want to get those, but those would be pushed out if the river reached a certain level and crossed the threshold. It would push those alerts.
Thank you. Thank you very much. That was the most important question. Thanks.
All right. Any more questions or comments from the council before we move forward?
One more question, Mr. President. This is for the emergency manager. They mentioned that how often would you check it? The gauges come in. Will you do something like Charlottesville is doing? I'm just concerned because I'm thinking of my military career. We always had flood warnings. We have gauges. We check it once a week to make sure everything was working, before the incident happened. So how often would you check it? Or is that something you thought about at this time?
I think that's something that we can narrow down on as we continue this process. Because again, after the installation, there will be some beta testing for us to really tweak and get the education on how the system works before it goes out to the public. But I do think that we would have to put into our process of how we would do that. And it would probably be blue sky what we would do, and then leading up to an event that we knew about what we would do moving towards that. So that's all something we can build into the process as we learn more about the system on the back end.
Thank you.
Mr. President, I have a question.
Sure. Go ahead, Mr. Councilman Cole.
So mine is for the emergency manager on the funding side. I see the numbers here in front of me. It says the optional tasks are about 60,000. We have the grant for 112,000. So if we authorize the optional tasks, that means it's going to cost 69,000 roughly, which is already in the CPI.
Yes, sir, it is. So as we've been moving through this process, we've been putting some funding in the CIP to get to this point. So there is funding that has been approved and budgeted for in the CIP. And then of course we do have the grant from the Maryland Department of Environmental for $112,000. So that would take care of the 3 base ones and the additional 4 optional ones to give us 7 gauges.
Thank you.
Any more questions or comments from the council? All right, if the council agrees, we'll award and approval at the mayor and city council meeting on Monday, June 6, 2022. Moving on to agenda item 1B, bid recommendation, Microsoft Enterprise License Agreement from the Department of IT. Director Frost, you have the floor.
Good evening, Mr. President, Mayor, and council members. Before you this evening is a contract with Microsoft. This is a 3-year contract. It rolls around essentially every 3 years. This is for our Office 365, our Microsoft 365, and our Microsoft Azure, which is our cloud services with Microsoft. We have approximately about 230 licenses attached to the Microsoft Office system, and this system includes our email and our Microsoft Office products such as Word and Excel and PowerPoint and all that stuff. This is what makes our city go. All our employees use these products every day. The total for the 3-year contract is around $222,000. That will be 3 annual payments of about $74,000. That $74,000 is in the current just approved fiscal year 23 budget. We'll be piggybacking or riding on the Maryland state contract through Software House International out of New Jersey. The state of Maryland has numerous software contracts with SHI. And with that, I'll answer any questions.
Right. Any questions from the council? No. All right. So if the council agrees, excuse me, if the council agrees, we'll award the contract at the mayor and city council meeting on Monday, June 6, 2022. All right, thank you, Director Frost. We're going to come right back to you because we're moving on to agenda item 1C, a bid recommendation for Civic Plus web design. Again, Director Frost, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Our current website is aging a little bit, and we want to update that. We did some searching to do a web contract, and we focused in on Civic Plus. Civic Plus is a IT vendor that supports municipalities throughout the country. They do HR, they do mobile apps, they do web design, and they have over 7,000 customers, and locally, City of Bowie and Prince George's County are clients of Civic Plus. So we're going to engage in a contract with Civic Plus to redesign a website for us. That project, we believe, will probably take about 6 months, involve all our employees, and we will probably seek some input from the public. And we'll have all the latest bells and whistles, so to speak. As part of that, we will also very likely upgrade to their mobile app. I know we put a newer mobile app in service about 2 years ago, but we believe we're going to go with their mobile app. We haven't made that decision yet. The contract is for approximately $65,000. And we're going to use GSA contract. Schedule 70 professional services will be the contract vehicle. And with that, I'll answer any questions.
All right. Any questions from the council? All right, well, I'd like to say I'm happy to hear about this. That's one of the things I've looked at since I've came on the council. So I'm happy to hear that the IT department on their own is doing that, and looking forward to see the outcome. And if the council agrees, we'll award the contract at the mayor and city council meeting on Monday, June 6, 2022. Thank you, Director Frost. Moving on to agenda item 1D, resolution 4-22, a resolution of the mayor and city council of Laurel, Maryland, for the purpose of designating the city of Laurel, Maryland as a B City USA affiliate and providing an effective date. Michelle Blair, Sustainability Coordinator, you have the floor.
Good afternoon, everyone. I will make this short and sweet. This is an easy one. So resolution 422 is a resolution for designating the city of Laurel as a B City. And it's one of the many areas where the city is working towards our long-term sustainability plan. An initiative of the Xerces Society for Invertebrate Conservation, B City USA provides a framework for communities to come together to conserve native pollinators by providing them with healthy habitats that are rich in a variety of native plants, provides nest sites, and is protected from pesticides. The first step in this important environmental initiative is the passage of the resolution. This will allow the city to work with B City USA and other cities, both locally and nationally, to accomplish the following: help to ensure the survival of vital animal species crucial to our planet's functioning ecosystems, bring our community together around a positive shared cause, and connect with others across the country that have made the same commitment. Improve local food production by raising community awareness of how our food grows, and improve local food production through expanded pollination. Support the growth of local businesses, including native plant nurseries and pollinator-friendly landscaping. Raise community awareness of the least toxic ways to tackle home and garden pest problems. The Tip It or Toss It mosquito program is one way the city helps residents to mitigate the mosquito problem in their neighborhoods. And raise community awareness of the local environment's diversity of plant and pollinator species. I will work closely with the Environmental Affairs Committee to ensure all the city's obligations will be met in a timely and efficient manner. The IPA will be coordinated with the Department of Parks and Recreation. For these reasons, I am asking the mayor and city council to consider passing resolution 4-22. That's it.
Thank you, Ms. Blair. Any questions or comments from the city council? All right. Well, the council agrees introduction and first public hearing on a resolution Number 4-22 will be at the Mayor and City Council meeting on Monday, June 6, 2022. Moving on to agenda item 1E, this is our last agenda item. Discussion on city purchasing procedures. Director Saylor, you have the floor.
Good evening. Section 524 of the city charter requires that any purchases or contracts of $35,000 or more be brought to the mayor and city council for approval. Given the current economic climate with supply chain issues and inflation, there can be issues. And so the ability for us to move quickly on purchases is becoming the difference between getting a truck or a vehicle, some other supplies. So we would be asking to pass a resolution that would allow us to do purchases and engage in contracts of $50,000, up to $50,000 without coming to the city council, as long as those items are in the adopted budget. And then we would make a subsequent report back to the council when these types of purchases have been made. So the resolution would be effective for about the next 12 months while we review the charter, confer with other jurisdictions to see what they're doing, to see if there's any more permanent, if a charter resolution is necessary to make any sort of permanent change. The amount was changed from 20,000 to 35,000 in January of 2013, just as a matter of history. So, so that's what we wanted to bring to your attention and see if there was any feedback from the council on moving forward with the resolution for July.
Any comments at the time from the council, or do you guys rather write an email or discuss later? Or
I just have a real quick question.
It's E.
I'll start with Councilman DeWalt.
Okay. Michelle, the only thing I'm concerned about is the locality of this, where this business is. I've always been a firm believer that if we have such a business and we can get a decent rate from that business that is in the city of Laurel, that's my number one request. And then it's if they're at least in Prince George's County, or if we have to go the state of Maryland, but not out of the state, because I'll veto or I'll vote no of anything out of the state unless it's a unique item. But I don't think we're looking at any unique items that are going to be over $50,000. But is there any way to, without our approval, is there any way to get in contact with us and let us know what business it is and where the exact location of that business is located?
So the departments, the purchasing is somewhat decentralized. It all comes to my office. We're checking for funding and we're checking the purchasing procedures that everyone has followed suit. And the procedures do, as does the charter actually, allows for us not to take the lowest bid if a city or local business is within a certain percentage. So it would allow for that.
That's very good. Yeah.
Mhm.
And we will be notified of, at least be an email or something like that, notified on what company it actually was.
We'll bring to the council any of these types of purchases that are made that you were used to seeing, but that differential of $15,000 is becoming an issue of having to wait for a council meeting.
I got you. All right.
Next time.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
Councilman Mitchell.
Yeah, I guess I had two questions. I was just trying to make sure, was this item E?
Yes.
Oh, okay. And I guess the follow-up question was, how do we as a city ensure that the buying happens locally first, and that we have a focus on minority, veteran, and women-owned businesses in the city?
We do have that as well in our purchasing policy. And like I said, purchases for those amounts come through my office. They go to the city administrator's office. So it's not just Mr. Lee from Public Works going out and buying a truck. It doesn't happen that way. So there are checks and balances all through the process.
Yes, no, I understand, I guess, the process that there are checks and balances, but I was actually asking, how do we ensure that in this process, things are fair and not biased, I should say?
I mean, I think following the process, the process itself allows for that, for us to double check and make sure, who the quotes are coming from, and those types of things.
Because I would assume that some of these businesses have done business with the city for quite some time. And if you have other contracts that are vying for contracts, they might not be as viable in the administration's eyes.
I think, with the level of the purchase we're talking about, vehicles and, we're writing state contracts. They do the legwork to get, those prices from vendors initially, but I know that Mr. Lee and his staff are frantically working overtime to try to find not just the state contract, but go to individual dealerships in the case of a vehicle when we're looking for one truck at a time.
Sure. Okay.
That answers your question. Or if
Mr. President, if I could maybe take up, I think what
Mr.
Councilman was asking
Mayor,
for. Thank you. The purchasing policy really is not going to change. That was adopted by the mayor and city council. So we have an obligation to follow that policy. What I think Michelle or Ms. Saylor is really asking is the money portion of it, because we're running into some problems. So minority contracting, women-owned, military, in the city, county, state, all of those things are addressed. And that's the check and balance that we do. And I think where we've run in the biggest concern may have been where there's 3 or 4 businesses and one business is in the city and all the other 3 are not. We went to the lowest bid, which was not in the city. And I think that's what Councilman DeWalt wants to make sure that we use that. That was changed several years, 2 or 3 years ago, when that was brought to our attention. And again, language was put out there, was discussed at a mayor and city council work session, and then approved. But the minority contracting, women-owned, all of those things we monitor as well, and we track, and we make sure that all of that is followed within the policy. I don't know if that answers your question or not. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President.
I appreciate that. I wouldn't say that answers my question. And I guess specifically while we're talking about the vehicles, I know of a business owner in the city of Laurel that has done trials with the city. And this business is certified with the state. This business does business with other municipalities, but not the city of Laurel. And so, with that being said, learning of different things like this, I just want to make sure that we are trying to get the talent from inside of Laurel and the services with inside of Laurel, as Councilmember DeWalt tried to always champion.
Well, are there any more comments from the council? No. All right. And you're fine. And that's all you have, Councilman Mitchell?
Yes. At this point in time, I'll make sure to send an email with a follow-up. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Saylor. Thank you for Mayor Mo for explaining that for the public just now. If there's no further business to come before the mayor and council tonight, the work session is adjourned.